I get it. You're wondering, Professor Haney, what is up with all the Snapchat filters? When we get to essay 4, you'll understand. There's an essay on how to do Snapchat. But in the meantime, what we are going to do is look at the instructions for the other essays, starting with today's essay 1. So you got through the 15-minute video for the instructions for the class, and now you are ready to take a quick video for essay 1. So you'll go into the modules and you will open up the file for the instructions for essay 1. Now, you obviously want to do the readings first, but it's nice to have taken a look at the instructions so you can have the instructions on your mind while you are reading the chapter. So the first chapter of Graphs They Say I Say talks about using templates to organize your ideas for your writing. And then chapter 6 has the readings that you will be responding to for essay 1. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 essays. So you'll be reading 2 essays tonight. You'll start the new Jim Crow, and then you'll read Jim Crow and Hillbilly Elegy Tuesday night, and Gabriela Moro's Minority Student Club, Segregation or Integration, and Robert Leonard's Why Rural America Voted for Trump on Wednesday night. And then Thursday, you'll be finishing the chapter with Stiglitz, A Tax System Stacked Against the 99%, and Barack Obama's Howard University commencement speech, and completing and submitting your final draft of essay 1. So our first essay is what we'd like to call a positional essay. So you're not going to be solving a problem. You're not going to be evaluating a solution. You're just going to be taking a stance on a subject saying, this is my position. I believe this. And the topic of this essay is what separates us. That's very appropriate for our times. Obviously, your content is going to change as we read, and you're going to add new components. The rough draft you're going to start today is probably going to be composed primarily with either Sean Blanda, Dana Boyd's, or Michelle Alexander's writing. And you might take things out or add new things. You do need to respond to at least 2 of the essays in chapter 16. But you might find maybe that you switch to a different position or topic with regards to segregation. But you're going to be taking a firm stance on segregation and answering the question, what separates us? And your direction is going to be either A, society segregates us, or B, this new topic that a lot of students have never heard about till they read these essays, and that is we self-segregate, right? So you're going to be writing a 5-paragraph rough draft for tomorrow night, and then adding 3 more paragraphs on Wednesday for your second rough draft for the peer review for a total of 8. And then you'll add 3 more for a total of 11 paragraphs for your final draft due on Thursday. Obviously your first paragraph will be your introduction, and any paragraphs that come after your introduction will be body paragraphs, and then your final paragraph will be a conclusion. So it's 1 intro, 9 bodies, and 1 conclusion. Graph talks about starting off with a illustrative quotation, a revealing statistic, fact, anecdote. Could also be a question, an exclamation. For those of you who took 801 or 105 with me, you remember my favorite hook of all time was a student writing an essay in English 801 discussing Mary Shelley's usage of Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner in Frankenstein. And she theorized that Mary Shelley was imitating and referring to poetry from Coleridge in her book because she's not a good writer, and she was plagiarizing and just copying him. And her hook was plagiarist! Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Plagiarist, 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 exclamation point. So you can also have an exclamation. Next, in your intro, you want to briefly summarize some of the background information that you are going to be covering. Before you jump into your position, this is a new structure some of you might not be very familiar with. To illustrate ideas that your readers might not be familiar with on the subject. So you might be providing a definition of a term, for example, self-segregation, some history on a subject, for example, new facts that you hadn't known before, like which states never had laws against marrying interracial marriage, and maybe some other background information to describe the problem you're discussing. So 3 background points that will eventually be followed with 3 body paragraphs. And then as soon as possible, your thesis, which in this case is your position, right? Answering the question, do we self-segregate or does society segregate us? You'll pick one. And then you will prove your thesis with 4 supports. So that you're saying, here's the first reason why I believe, for example, we self-segregate. Here's the second reason why we self-segregate. Here's the third. Here's the fourth. Next new paragraph that some of you might not be familiar with is acknowledging objections someone else might have to our subject. So objections here is not something you object to. It's acknowledging that if you believe, for example, that we self-segregate, someone else might say, no, society segregates us. And so you acknowledge that. And then, of course, finally refuting that objection, saying why their objection is not valid, right? Because they have to give a reason why they disagree with you, and then you say why that disagreement is not valid. After your introduction is 11 points. You will go into body paragraphs. The body paragraphs are worth 4 points each. And have a specific structure as well, addressing 1 point, for example, a definition, starting with that topic sentence to illustrate that point, and then supported with a quote from the reading that you introduce with the author and title, and then after the quote, you explain it. And then, of course, we'll move on to our conclusion. Here is a very trusty outline. Each bullet point is worth 1 point. Here's the intro, 11 points. So your 11 points: hook, background 1, 2, and 3, your thesis, reasons 1, 2, and 3, and 4, the objection and the refutation. So for your background, you might have things like a definition, history, description, right? Your position, do we self-segregate or does society segregate us? Your first, second, third, and fourth reason for your position. Acknowledging someone else's objection to your position or your reasons, and then refuting that objection. And then your body paragraphs. So with your first body paragraph, for example, being a definition, your body 1 might be on a definition. So you'll have your topic sentence, for example, the definition of self-segregation, and then introduce a quote, for example, according to, what's the author's name? Dana Boyd, in her article, Why is America Self-Segregating? And then you'll have your quote, blah, 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 and the page number, and then explain the quote. And you'll do this for each of your background paragraphs, and then your 4 body paragraphs, right? Your reason, for example, the first reason why we self-segregate, and then you would introduce a quote, for example, Dana Boyd, the title, Why is America Self-Segregating, the quote, and the page number, and then you'll explain the quote. You'll continue that for your body paragraphs till your 8th paragraph, acknowledging an objection. And this is where I want to slow down a little, because some people will acknowledge the objection and then have a quote and an explanation to refute it, and you'll lose points for that. Your topic sentence should be acknowledging, well, there are some people who might disagree that we self-segregate and believe that society segregates us. For example, according to so-and-so in the article, blah, blah, blah. So, for example, if you think we don't self-segregate, but society segregates us, you might say, for example, in Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, right? And then you will have a quote from her essay illustrating why we are segregated with the page number, and then explain that quote, explaining how the quote explains someone's opposition to your point, and then you would refute it, right, with a topic sentence, right, explaining why that objection is not valid. And then your conclusion, the conclusion is worth 10 points, where you summarize your 3 backgrounds, for example, definition, history, description, restate your thesis, your position, right? Do we segregate or does society segregate us? Your 4 reasons, your objection and refutation. I really do mean for every body paragraph to have a quote. And you don't really need a quote in the intro or conclusion unless you're using a quote for a hook, but then you don't want to be explaining it, right? Because then your intro turns into a body paragraph. There's 57 points to cover for this essay. So for tomorrow at 11:59, all you need to do is have your first 5 paragraphs typed up, and you will submit that on here for Tuesday, June 16th, right, from the modules. And you will just click on the assignment and submit your draft. There's a super helpful copy of the outline here. Something I do want to show you really quickly, though, for those of you who might struggle with writing, remember Mad Libs. What many of my students actually do if they are not sure if they are covering all their points, to ensure that they get all of their points, what they do is they copy and paste this outline and put it into a Word doc or into the text box for the assignment and copy and paste it. So I'm just going to show you that really quickly. So when you are ready to submit your assignment, you'll notice this little red box here for submit assignment. And you are perfectly welcome to do text entry and then paste the bullet points and start typing your essay here. The problem with the text entry submission is that I cannot put comments on it to show you where you need to make corrections. So I'm going to show you this in Microsoft Word. So we're going to paste the bullet points and remember what I said about Mad Libs. So I'm going to go to my first point, and remember the joke I made about my favorite hook ever, right? Was plagiarist. Ooh, Professor Haney typed it wrong. Nope, that's right. So there's the hook, right? And then you will put your first background point. For example, many people are not familiar with the term self-segregation. Meaning to separate one's self from others in society, right? For example. And then your next point, right? Ironically, historically, there were many states that did not have laws preventing mixed race marriages, right? And then your final background point, a description of the problem, right? To describe the problem, we are having many people are separated in society, period, right? And then you have your thesis, right? It is society that segregates us, right? So your position, just not I think, not I feel, no hedges, just society segregates us. And then your first background topic sentence for your first reason, right? The first reason why it is society that segregates us, right? And then you'll type your essay. Now, for the submission, I'm not really worried about which paragraphs you do. It can be your intro, the first 3 backgrounds, and reason 1, just going in order. It can be the intro, 1 background, 1 reason, the objection, the refutation, the conclusion, right? It's any 5 that you want. So once you save your document, what you can do is then go into Canvas and do your submission. So for those of you who've never done this, sorry if I'm boring you, I hope you had coffee. But you'll go into the self-review and click submit assignment, just like I mentioned before. You can do the text entry where you type it here, or you can do a file upload. You choose the file, which in this case was, it titled itself plagiarist, didn't it? Let's see, the file's there, and then you just click submit. I would always wait till it's all the way through, and then you get, yay, celebration that it's in, and you'll see submitted and the time. Once you have your essay completed, you will just go here to submitting essay 1 draft 1. You'll just click on it. You'll click submit assignment. And as I mentioned, you can copy and paste your essay here into the text entry. But what most of my students like to do so that I can make comments is do file upload. So you'll just click choose file. I believe it's self-named, it's self-plagiarist. You always want to save your files. That way, tomorrow night when you're doing your 3 extra paragraphs to make it an 8-paragraph essay for peer review, you don't need to retype everything. You have it saved. So you'll see the files there, and you can just click submit assignment, and it goes, you always want to wait till it's done, and then it goes, whee, and celebrates little panda bears, right? So to show you what you need to do next, right, definitely you need to get your essay in by 11:59, but you also need to do the self-review. And notice that the essay is worth 0 points, but that the review is worth 10. So you do need to do the rough draft in order to get points for the self-review. And so to go into the self-review, you'll go in and notice the same thing, right? There's questions here about your draft. And what many of my students do is just copy and paste. Now notice, alarmingly, there is 68 questions. You don't need to answer all of them. You just need to answer the questions for the portions of the essay that you did. So if you just did the intro and background 1, 2, and 3 and reason 1, those are the only ones you need to answer. So you can go through and click submit assignment. Again, you can copy and paste it into text entry or create a file. I'm just going to kind of show you what it looks like if you do it in text entry. Notice that there's a lot of yeses and nos here. The only questions you're actually writing answers to are numbers 1 through 11. So once you've copied and pasted these questions, you're just going to answer the questions or upload the file. So you'll answer all the questions for the paragraphs that you have. And notice questions 1 through 11 are short answer. For example, what is your hook? I put plagiarist, 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 exclamation point. So the answer would just be, for example, an exclamation. So what is your hook? An exclamation. What is the topic for your first topic sentence? And the answer, the definition of self-segregation. 2, what is your second background paragraph? The history of laws that never had interracial marriage, right? States that never had interracial marriage. What is the topic for your third background? For example, the description of Jim Crow laws, right? So you would just kind of answer it that way. Notice questions 12 and on are just yeses and nos, and the paragraphs you don't have can just be left blank, right? So make sure your topic is self-segregation or segregation. I have had students accidentally not read the instructions and do it wrong and say, oh, this is why sport athletes in college would get paid and they would get an F, right? Because they're not answering the question, and hopefully they're not just copying and pasting an essay from last semester. But, right, so you will just go through and answer it, and you don't even need to leave the questions here. What is your hook or attention getter? An exclamation. See, Professor Haney's not about you killing yourself and getting arthritis and writing too much, right? Your first background, the definition of self-segregation. Right? What is your second background paragraph, right? So, whatever you're picking. Could be history, right? In my case, the history of states that did not have laws regarding mixed race marriages. Yay, California, I think. And, right, your third background, right? Description of the problem of segregation, right? And then, of course, your thesis, right? That society segregates us, right? And then your reasons, right? 1 through 11 are, open-ended, couple words. And then just to kind of show you this really quick, because I know some people are like, oh my God, it's a lot of writing. It's just the first 11, and they're like one-word answers, right? Like an exclamation, right? Notice from backgrounds, right? Do you have a transition phrase to signal this is the first body paragraph in support? Basically that you're saying, for example, to provide some background or something like that. And you're just going to be putting yeses and nos. So like what I see a lot, and it's perfectly fine that my students do, is what I see. Yes. Yes. Stuff like that. And that is fine. And when you're done and you've answered your questions, you'll just click submit and it'll go, yay, and you're done. So that's all you need to do for the first rough draft and the self-review. Next time on Wednesday, you'll be submitting a rough draft for the peer review, and notice that that does need to be 8 paragraphs by 8 a.m. So you'll go through and you'll submit it, right? You'll just resubmit your file. Hopefully you've added those 3 new paragraphs. It does need to be in by 8 a.m. Wednesday. The computer will assign a peer reviewer to you at noon. So if you have your draft submitted at 12:01, you won't get points because you won't get a peer review, because everybody will already be assigned, and I can't pull it away from someone who's already been working. And your answers to the peer review questions are due by 11:59. Also, a journal is going to be due, which is just, what is the most insurmountable obstacle you're facing? Stuff like that. And then Thursday, your final draft is due. And we will talk more later about the other assignments that are in here. I don't want to make this video 20 minutes long.